Good morning. And I'll tell you what, wine's not just for breakfast anymore.
I agree with you on that. So I have my bottle of the M 2016 here, and it looks like you're ahead of me. So we're gonna dive into the M here shortly and talk about the really your whole estate there and the different properties and the wines. So we'll give people a few moments to join. It'll take them just a few minutes to kind of connect in with us. But where are you at right now? Are you at home? Are you at the winery?
Actually, in our office in
Wow.
Napa, and we have been running skeleton ever since we were allowed to come back in the office. Maximum we'll have maybe 4 people in the office. It used to have 40.
Whoa.
And we kind of rotate. Most people are working remotely, and we're very, very scrupulous on the social distancing, which I think they should change the name to make it physical distancing, so you're physically apart and conscious of it. But fortunately, everyone has been healthy and safe, and we've had no cases within our community of our entire company.
Oh, that's amazing. So, being particular, and we all have to do these new measures just to keep everything safe and to keep the operations running. And we're doing the same thing with Touton and alternating, and it's the new reality. So you're in the office. So we're going to give people just a few more moments to connect before we start talking about the estate and the 2020 harvest and some things like that. I wanted to ask you because I came across this picture and I was reading about it. I found it fascinating. Tell me just a bit before we get started with the rest of the conversation about this picture. So it's your cellar. So I want to just talk a moment about your cellar. It has to be amazing. I hope to see it in person one day. But tell me a bit about that. What's your collection like? What's it geared towards?
Great. First of all, if we can pull you up from Southern California, I'd love to go down in the cellar and have fun with some of the older vintages and some of the more unique wines. I started building the cellar really in the 60s when I started working with my father as we founded Robert Mondavi. Because at home, whether it was my grandparents, my father, my uncle, the only wine cellar they had was really kind of a closet in the garage, in the pantry, and it would have maybe 3 or 4 cases of wine in it. And it was like the shoe man. His kids were always running around with holes in the bottom of their shoes. I thought, I really want to start a wine cellar. So I started collecting older Charles Krug Vintage Select Cabernets. And I have that going back to 1944, the first
Wow.
vintage that they produced, a Cabernet owned by the Mondavi family. And then I started saving better vintages, and I thought, if I can keep a case or more of the better vintages of each one, especially as people have children or they visit and it's their birth year, I love to present people with a bottle of wine that my family or I made of the year of their birth.
That's really
And
amazing.
I asked them to take it home to enjoy it with their friends, and then to get one of those pens that writes on glass in either silver or gold,
Yeah.
and put the date that they enjoy the wine, and have each of their friends sign it or put the initials on the bottle. Because 20 years after that, they could look at the bottle, see the signatures and the date, and vividly remember the friendship and the conversation. And to me, that's what wine's all about.
Exactly. It brings you right back. And it's really, you've collected almost a museum. So it's a living museum of the history of your family, which is it's just amazing. So,
Well,
um,
you by saying that, you've also seen that, or aware, I have a lot of white wines that are 20, 30, and 40 years old.
wow.
And they aren't fresh and fruity, but it's really very educational and very exciting and interesting to taste these old Grand Dames that are, 40-year-old Chardonnay, 40-year-old Sauvignon Blanc, or Sauvignon Blanc Botrytis, which those sweet wines tend to age better than the regular ones.
Exactly. Amazing. And it gives you a frame of reference in your mind for that vintage and that place. It's
Yes.
I hope to see it in person, hopefully one day soon. So
Hopefully sooner rather than later.
yeah, exactly. So we've got a good crowd following us. So let's go ahead and do our official intro. So everyone tuning in, thank you so much for joining us. Today we're joined by Michael Mondavi. He's a co-founder of Michael Mondavi Family Estates within Napa Valley. And before I turn it over to you, Michael, for a bit of history, I want to give everyone just a bit of background on these talks as well. So Touton Live, we started back in March, April, during the beginnings of the pandemic, as a way to really connect and engage with our suppliers, our wineries, but most importantly, our customers and our sommeliers who we weren't seeing on a day-to-day basis anymore. So it's really grown into this great community and a way to connect. And really today is a culmination of that and having you with us today, Michael. So I just want to thank you for your time. I know you're busy, but it's great to have you with us
This
today.
is one of the silver linings, very few of them, unfortunately, but one of the silver linings of this whole COVID situation is we're learning through modern technology how to be better communicators. Even though we can't be together, we can electronically be together as we are this morning.
Exactly. And maybe in some ways communicating better than ever and closer together. And it's not just emails, we're doing Zoom calls and Instagram lives. And it is an interesting time, but we're making it work. So I want to give everyone, before I turn it over to you for a bit of history on the estates, I want to just show everyone where we're at on the map today. I always like maps. Even though everyone's familiar with California, it's always fun to take a look at a map first. So today we're in the North Coast. We're way up north in the purple region. It's a bit small, but you can see that lavender purple region of Northern California. And when we zoom into that, we have Sonoma on the west coast there, which is purple, and then down on the lower east coast there you have Napa Valley, so that's the orange section. So today we're going to be focusing on Napa Valley, where Michael and his family grew up, 4 generations, and still producing amazing wine today. And then we zoom in and we see a closer map of Napa Valley here. So we'll bounce back to these maps a few different times throughout the conversation, but first of all, Michael, I want to turn it over to you. Give us a bit of history of yourself, a bit of the family, but really about the Michael Mondavi family estate and how that was founded.
Okay, thank you. Fortunately, I'm 3rd generation wine grower in Napa Valley. My grandparents immigrated from Italy to Minnesota. Thank God for Prohibition, because it drove my grandfather to Lodi, California to begin shipping grapes and winemaking supplies during Prohibition. Then at the end of Prohibition, they started making wine in bulk. And from 1933 up until the early 50s, 90+% of all wine sold in America from California was sold in tank cars or barrels. Very little of it bottled at the winery and shipped. And that was the modern way. In 1942, with World War II, they had a wage and price control. They froze the price of bulk wine, the commodity, at 12.5 cents a gallon. My grandfather was making wine in the San Joaquin Valley. Cost him about 8 cents a gallon to produce it. My father was making wine for his father in the Napa Valley. It cost him about 12 cents a gallon to make it. And they realized here in Napa and Sonoma, they couldn't make any money. They couldn't survive with that wage and price control selling the commodity. So there was like an avalanche of winery owners and managers going from the commodity business to the consumer product. And my father believed if you would, with Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon, you could sell it for 25 cents a bottle. 5 bottles to the gallon, that's $1.25. There's enough room for the bottle, the cork, the foil, marketing, sales, and some profit. And that converted the California wine industry from shipping wine as commodities to wholesalers around the country, where the wholesalers would bottle the wine and put their regional labels on it. Right. It created national brands and bottled at the winery, like Nice-en-Bateau at Chateau, like the French, where Baron Philippe de Rothschild was the first in Bordeaux to bottle his wines at the Chateau, because he was concerned that people were blending other wines with his Chateau Mouton Rothschild.
Right.
So The government stepped in, but innovation go from a commodity to a consumer product. I grew up at the Charles Krug Winery, and I was about 100 yards from the winery from about 5 or 6 years old. The cellar master was my babysitter. The winery and the equipment was my jungle gym. I mean, it was wonderful. Oh, that's my Porsche, 1952 Porsche single-cylinder diesel tractor.
I gotta
And it's
tell
been
you,
totally restored. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful old farm implement that actually was used tremendously throughout Europe in the 50s and 60s.
you still own that tractor?
But then, having grown up there, in 1966, my father and I started the Robert Mondavi Winery. That grew beautifully, as I'm sure you and everyone knows. And our family sold the company because it was public in 2004. And in that year, we started with the Michael Mondavi Family Estate Wines. In 1999, I had bought vineyard parcel up in Atlas Peak because Opus One, my brother Tim, the co-winemaker with the French, was very interested in having hillside vineyard blended with the Oakville Valley floor. It gave more structure. And so when our family sold the company and we really started making wine, the first wine we produced was the M Cabernet from Atlas Peak. The 2004 vintage we declassified and did not bottle because it was so big and so intense. It was a beautiful blending wine, but you'd have to wait about 30 years before it aged and the tannins would get soft enough to really be enjoyable. So we learned how to produce a single vineyard wine up in the hills with more tannin as a more gentle wine by using natural farming, compost, a little more organic matter to the roots so the berries were slightly larger. And it has been very interesting. We have migrated, if you will, from the valley floor up into the hills, 1,300 feet elevation above the valley floor, for two reasons. The soil structure is different, and Napa Valley has over half of the world's soils types. And as you saw on the map earlier, we're 3 to 5 miles wide. We're about 30 miles long. We go from essentially sea level vineyard, which is in that photograph there at about 50 feet above sea level, up to where our hillside vineyards are between 1,200 and 1,450 feet elevation. The advantage to that is for every 1,000 feet you go up in elevation, you lose about 8 degrees Fahrenheit. So with this whole global warming situation, by having the vineyards higher, we have a longer growing season. Whether you're growing strawberries or peaches or grapes, the longer the growing season, the more flavor you'll have in that fruit. And we are harvesting nutrients and flavor from the soil, and we're harvesting sugar from the photosynthesis through the leaves from the sunlight. And you have to balance that rate of growth so you can drag it out as long as possible and still have full, rich flavor with a balance of acid and sugar.
And it's that balance that's so complicated. It strikes me that after making wine in Napa Valley for 40 years, you were still learning with the creation of Michael Mondavi Family Estates and with the hillside vineyards. It's always a learning progress.
The more we learn, the more we realize we don't know.
True.
And Mother Nature's in charge. When I first started making wine in the 60s, I was the winemaker and the grape grower was the grape grower. And it was like a relay race where the grape grower would call and say, oh, on Tuesday next week, I'll deliver your Cabernet. And I go, okay, great. And it was a relay. We were grape growers and winemakers. Now we're wine growers. We have much more control of the style and character of the wine in the vineyard than we do once the grapes are harvested. And we've learned that through year after year and trial and error that you can't just grow the big crop. The berries should be about the size of my little fingernail, not larger than the ring fingernail. And as they get larger, there's less skin to liquid ratio, particularly for Cabernets. The skin is where that pulp is and where all the character and flavor is. And so you have a big berry, you're going to have a thinner wine. Smaller berry, smaller wine. So each extreme is not good. So it has to be somewhere in that balance. And it's taken us years to understand and nurture, if you will, the soil, the pruning, the manicuring techniques in the vineyard so we get the optimum flavor at the optimum maturity.
It's just so complicated. And even I'm a wine geek and I've been in the wine business 17, 18 years. And as much as you read, it's just, you just have to get in there and experiment and do it. It's just so complicated and tough to wrap your head around. Even for you doing it for 50 years and you're still learning, it's just,
well,
it's impressive.
The first 15 or 20, I thought I knew what
Michael, you there?
I found that I'm here.
Okay,
then I
good.
found that we back?
Yeah, we're good. We're good. Keep on going. There was just a slight
good.
hesitation. You're good.
I found that Mother Nature was in charge. We're not in charge. And once I realized that, the learning really began. And like this year, with we had a great growing season this year. The winter was a little less than normal rainfall, but a beautiful growing season. And then bang, those fires hit about 3 weeks ago. We were able to protect the vineyards from the fires. However, we can't protect the vineyards from smoke taint.
Right.
And for those of you who enjoy fresh salmon and also enjoy smoked salmon, the Cabernet grapes that are out there now are like dry smoked salmon. I doubt if we will harvest any of the Cabernet. That's a photograph of the fires of 3 weeks ago, right at our vineyard on Howell Mountain. You can see the flames there. The smoke, we call it now, we're learning, fresh smoke from the fire is far more absorbed by the fruit and leaves than older smoke that lingers over the valley for a week or so. And it's that hot smoke that covered most of the hillsides in Napa and Sonoma, Lake, and Mendocino counties that is going to be so devastating to the 2020 harvest. Many of us have done chemical analysis on the grapes, and you can chemically get it down to, you can determine if it has 1 part per billion. On white wines, 2 parts per billion is noticeable in the palate and in the nose. In red wines, it's 4 parts per billion. Some of the tests we've done have been 12 and 15 and 20 parts per billion, way over the threshold. And the problem is you can't eliminate. You can eliminate the odor, but then you eliminate flavor and aroma of the grape. But there's this, it's almost an abrasive, not directly like tannin, but an abrasive grit that's on the tongue as a result of that smoke.
Yeah.
And we don't think you can get rid of that. And so we've just said it's probably wiser and safer to not even harvest the grapes this year.
It's unbelievable. It's hard to fathom that possibility, but you have to do what you have to do. We were talking the other day. I think you said, didn't you harvest the Sauvignon Blanc right before?
Yes, we were very fortunate. The Wednesday the fires started, and actually this photograph was taken the next morning. The Wednesday before, as the fires started, we coincidentally harvested the Sauvignon Blanc. We were going to originally harvest on Friday, and when we saw the fires starting and the experience we had in 2017 with how fast the fires moved, we said, Sauvignon Blanc is essentially ready, almost ready. Let's get it off the vine now. Let's not risk it. Thank goodness we did it, because it's the only grapes that we harvested that don't have some degree, if not total degree, impact of the smoke.
That's the whole
that's
thing.
A great shot of that airplane. That's a DC-10, and that was on Friday, and that photograph's taken from our vineyard, and the plane is about 200 yards to the north of our vineyard, putting a fire break between the fire, our vineyard, and then we had 3 large Caterpillar tractors cutting fire breaks. The CAL FIRE people saw what a job we were doing to protect our own vineyards and area. They hired the 3 tractors to build about 35 miles of fire break from east of St. Helena all the way north to Middletown. And it's amazing that they were able to save so much because of the work of what they call the Redneck Fire Department driving their Caterpillar tractors.
Yeah. Well, it's a community of tractors, so that's, I mean, one small saving grace, but it's just heartbreaking to see that. And the fires have been so huge throughout the North Coast and really the whole state. It's really.
The good news is today is the 2nd day in a month that we've had clear air.
Wow.
And Northern California, San Francisco to Sacramento, the whole North Bay area had over 30 days of declared bad air. And the previous record was 8 days.
Wow.
So the heavy smoke, you couldn't see the hills half a mile away for many days. You couldn't see the sun. On Wednesday, 2 weeks ago, most people were very confused because it looked like it was still night at 10, 11 o'clock in the morning.
I know, it's unbelievable. So, you know, the fact of the modern, you know, situation, especially within California, and we're all going to have to get smarter about it and try to manage it going forward.
The Indians were better at forest management 200 and 300 years ago than we are.
Right.
And fortunately, with help from the University of California and their research and carbon dating on studying forests, they've proven this, and they've been meeting with the governor and with federal officials to try to change the philosophy of our forest management to what the Indians did a few hundred years ago. And I think that's going to be progress.
Well, any progress at this point is going to be a huge help. So I'm looking at the time, and time is slipping away as it tends to do. So let's, I want to speak about Rob and Dina and your wife and their roles in the company. And because I know you're the namesake, but you're really the co-founder along with the rest of your family.
Yes, actually, it's my son and daughter really are the ones that are doing the work now. Rob is responsible for all of the grape growing and winemaking. Dina assists him in some of the final tastings, and then she focuses on really more of the marketing and the family communicating to our consumers about the wines. My wife is the one that just simply says, like my grandmother, make wine that tastes good. And in the photograph here on the right is the rosé of Cabernet. The bottle is designed, the style really focused on by my wife and daughter.
I love it.
They wanted a Cabernet that had some flavor. They wanted it crisp and dry so it would complement food. I love it on the rocks as an aperitif.
Yeah, perfect.
And then when I'm going to have like barbecue chicken for dinner or some fish, I get rid of the ice and just drink the nice chilled rosé with the entree. The next is the Animo. We have both the Cabernet Sauvignon and the Heritage Sauvignon Blanc. The Heritage Sauvignon Blanc is called Heritage because the original cuttings, the rootstock and the clonal selection came from Chateau Yquem in the 1880s by a Professor Whitmore, who brought over 300 different cuttings from France back to the Oakville area in Touton, planted the vineyards. That vineyard was then replanted in the 1940s with the same rootstock, and clonal selection from essentially the neighboring grapevines. And then 12 years ago, my son got a phone call from the vineyard manager for Constellation that now owns Robert Mondavi and said, "We're tearing out that old heritage Sauvignon Blanc. Do you want cuttings?" And Rob went, "Absolutely." Got the cuttings and then planted on our Oso vineyard up on Howell Mountain at 1,200 feet, the original St. George rootstock, the original third generation cutting, and the vines are head pruned like you would just a single rose bush, and not with cordons. We get about 3 tons to the acre, not 9 or 10. Right. But the flavor in those berries and the flavor of the resulting wine is just spectacular. And we're very thankful that that vineyard was harvested prior to these terrible fires.
Yeah, for sure. So I know a lot of people are tuning in and waiting for the M. So let's just jump to it. And then if we have more time, we can chat about a few more things. So tell us a bit about the M and specifically the 2016 and why it's unique.
Well, 2016 to me is, I mentioned relay race before. This is the one where Rob really, from the viticulture, the grape growing, winemaking, he took the baton. And in the past, and in fact, going back historically, my grandfather, father, uncle, brother, myself, in our different Cabernet blends, we always used Cabernet family, Merlot, Petit Verdot, etc. And in this, Rob wanted to use that Cabernet family, but much more so than the 25% that's allowed to call it Cabernet Sauvignon. So the 2016 is not called Cabernet Sauvignon, it's called Napa Valley red wine. And we have, I have to look at the notes, but 58% Cabernet Sauvignon. In the past, we would have much higher percentages of Cabernet. What we found was, particularly with the hillside vineyards, the Cabernet Franc is like 30%, Merlot 5%, Petit Verdot 5%, and 2% Malbec. That blending of the different structures of those grapes and of those wines made a far superior blend. We tested this in 2015, and it was very close, the 76, 78% Cabernet with the other varieties. But in 2016, this blend was head and shoulders above anything that had 75% Cabernet. So we had to make a decision. Are we going to call this Cabernet because we have, and everybody looks Cabernet, Cabernet? Or are we going to make the best possible Bordeaux style or Cabernet style of wine we can? And very simply, that was the decision. And even in the future, if we go above 75%, we'll probably still just call it Napa red wine.
Yeah. Well, it's a tough decision. And I can see that too from a marketing standpoint, but I really respect the fact that you and Rob and Dina decided to go with the best wine, which is what makes sense, of course. So yeah. Before we taste it, there's a question that came across, Michael. What's the source for the grapes for this vineyard? Is it Oakville? Is it Howell Mountain or Atlas Peak? Or what's the source?
The original source for M was the Animo Vineyard on Atlas Peak at about 1,450 elevation. The soil there is very volcanic, a lot of rock, thinner soils. And very nice, but firm, structured tannins. The Oso Vineyard, which is on Howell Mountain, approximately 5 miles north on the same eastern range, has a little more organic matter in the soil, a little less volcanic. The wines are a little rounder. What we found with the 15 and the 16, we are blending some of both vineyards together rather than using the exclusive Animo Vineyard as we had originally. And again, it is giving us additional layers of flavor, more complexity, and we think uh, by blending the result of the different soil types together, we're getting very, very nice synergy in that wine.
Exactly, and it's all about balance. So let's actually taste. I happen to be fortunate enough today to have a bottle of the 2016 as well here. Thank you to Folio and Gary Gruner for sending this my way. So let me get a bit in the glass here. And Michael, walk us through a tasting of this wine.
Well, notice the aromatics just really jump out at you, and they're rich and full. I'm not a good one for saying, oh, you have coffee and juniper and this and that, but I do get a very, very nice aromatic with some hints of juniper or even some redwood forest character in it.
Definitely some nice spice there, but nice, luscious, dark fruit. Really pretty.
And, my grandmother taught me make wine that tastes good. Her description of that was not to describe the wine, but to say if you're serving a wine with a meal to family and friends, if they want a second or third or fourth glass, that tastes good. But if they only drink one, go back to work. And what exactly. I notice, there are certain wines that you just want to keep smelling, and it almost delays the enjoyment of tasting the wine because the aromatics are so inviting. You just keep going back. And this is one of those wines that just invites you back just for another wonderful aroma.
I keep on doing it. I keep on going back to it. It's really aromatic, and even though this is the current release, 2016, it is very open and opulent, and it's very expressive.
And I like particularly the younger Cabernets. I like to aerate the heck out of them. It really allows them to open up, and you can almost pretend they're 5 years older if you give them a good aeration. Or sometimes if I'm home and I just open the bottle and take a little taste, I'll pretend it's a martini shaker.
Exactly.
I'll shake it a little. I don't know if you can see here, but there's
the bubbles,
slight foam on the top. Yeah. There is natural residual carbon dioxide in all young wines, and it'll slowly over the years dissipate. But that very minute amount of carbon dioxide, when in contact with the tannins, exaggerate the tannins.
Right.
And so by doing just that little bit, it stimulates the aeration, but also eliminates the micro CO2. And all of a sudden, the aromatics are fresher, and the feel is more caressing and more gentle rather than firmer. And it's I urge decanting young Cabernets, whether they're Bordeaux or California.
Exactly. So it was about 2 hours ago, I double decanted this back into the bottle, and I have a slight chill on it, cellar temp, but it's perfect right now. What did you do to your bottle, out of curiosity? Did you just pop it this morning, or did you decant it?
I just opened it this morning and I gave it the martini shake.
Okay. Nice. Well, on the go and in a pinch, it definitely works. So let's go ahead and taste this. I haven't tasted it yet.
I've embarrassed a couple of very nice sommeliers because they didn't have a decanter handy, and I tasted the wine and it was beautiful but a little tight, and so I just said, may I see the bottle? And then I shook it like a martini shaker, and I poured a glass, and I had the sommelier taste the original glass that was poured and then the shaken up. They're two completely different wines. It's as if you'd have had the wine open for hours. The aromatics are fresher. The palate is more delicate and more friendly.
That's really amazing. I've never done that direct side by side. I have to try
it next time.
So I saw we had a comment come through from your winemaker, one of your winemakers, Sabrina. So I just wanted to give her a shout out and show her picture here.
Yeah, Sabrina is terrific. In fact, what I've learned over the years, and fortunately Rob also understands that completely. Sorry guys, but women have a better palate than men. And Sabrina not only has a better palate than we do, but she is also wonderfully educated in the science of enology, and has worked with us now for 4 years. And last year, Rob said, instead of having her title be assistant winemaker, we should give her title of winemaker, because she is really helping us improve the quality and style of our wines. And I encourage any winemakers to make sure that they have qualified women who are helping to direct their program.
No, for sure. It's so cool. She's doing a spectacular job, as is Rob. So let's I haven't even tasted this. So let me give it a taste. What do you sense on the palates? What really sticks out to you?
What I like on the 16 is the most gentle or friendly of our M Cabernets, without giving up any of its structure and body and ageability. And it's literally taken us about 12 years to figure out how to manicure the vineyard to give full rich body with more round, soft tannin, rather than the sharper tannin that is typical of hillside vineyards.
And like you say, it is definitely approachable. The tannin is ripe, it's round, it's definitely present, but the fruit is there.
Cabernet Franc, as you know, Cabernet Franc can be pretty lean and firm. The Cabernet Franc blended with the Cabernet Sauvignon, you would expect logically for them to be harsher.
Right.
But they don't. They kind of combine and they make it more gentle, full-bodied, and strong.
What's I'm just losing my train of thought, because the length on this is so great. Definitely tasting it a minute or two after I swallowed it here, and it's so elegant. But you could definitely,
yeah, that's one of the, to me, the telltale signs of a wine that has wonderful full body that will age for many years, is if you have a very nice, lingering, pleasant aftertaste.
Exactly.
That wine will also have a nice, lingering, continued life in the bottle.
It just has such a velvety texture. I love it. What's the aging program on this? Do you know off the top of your head?
We aged, let me take a quick look. The 65% of the barrels were new French oak.
Okay.
We aged it in those barrels for 21 months. And we had 35%, needless to say, of the barrels. We call that neutral oak. They're 2 or 3 times used. We want the ageability of an oak barrel without the extraction of the oak flavor.
Right.
And we use oak not just for extracting flavor, but to help nurture the wine's natural aging process. And the wood does that. So we use the oak as a good chef would use herbs or spices in cooking.
Exactly.
If you're going to have a wonderful poulet a la creme with a little tarragon, you want to taste the chicken, the cream, and a little kiss of the tarragon. You don't want just overpowering tarragon. We look at oak in the same way. We want a balanced, friendly use of oak. You want to notice it's there, but not in your face.
And I love that analogy, the chef analogy of a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You know, it's a lot of times it makes something better than the sum of its parts. So it's the wine is just spectacular, and I know it was highly rated. I believe it was a 96 points this vintage from James Suckling.
Yes, it's really fun to watch the ratings. I wish they were a little more aggressive, but each year we seem to pick up a point or two, and that goes to what Rob's done in the vineyard over the last number of years and what he and Sabrina are doing now in the winemaking and the blending as we go forward. And I expect these ratings will continue to climb, because tasting the 18, and we had no 17, by the way, because of the fires. We declassified all of it because it was Cabernet Sauvignon barbecue sauce. Wow. It was very nice and smoky. And so the 18 and 19 are beautiful in the barrel. I doubt if any of the 20 vintage will get to the barrel.
It's you know, it's just, it's heartbreaking to hear you lose 2 vintages within out of 4. So it's It's unbelievable. But
you know, as we're talking, I just keep going back to the aroma of this. It's I think by far the best aromatic of any of the wines that we've made at M, and any of the wines that my brother and I made previously at Robert Mondavi. It's just an exciting aromatic.
Exactly. So it's, and I like that the experimentation continues and the tweaking continues, and it obviously it's a unique product per vintage, so it depends on the harvest, it depends on the vintage. But this is really spectacular. So for those listening, if you don't have a bottle of M in front of you, we do have stock, some stock. It's very limited production. I believe you make less than 400 cases of this, and
it was 396 cases of the 16,
and that's the three packs. That's just the three packs, right?
That's sold in 3-packs, yes. And I was always kind of disheartened when you had to buy 12 bottles of more expensive wines, especially if you're a restaurant or a small quality retail shop. For 12 bottles of an expensive wine that you may have a couple of customers who want 3 or 4 each, but then you're sitting there on inventory. And we felt that it was better to give the customer the option. If they want 3, 6, 9, 12, they can do it and not have the old broken case charge and all that.
Exactly. Well, actually, I was going to show it here because they sent me a bottle, but they also sent me the beautiful wood case that it comes in. So it's a beautiful wood 3-pack that opens up. So it's a beautiful packaging as well. So nice job on the aesthetics there. It's really beautiful, especially for I'm an retailer.
It's
yeah.
You know, a quality product should have beautiful quality of the packaging as well as the quality of the product.
Exactly. So we're already over time, unfortunately, as tends to happen during these. But
Mondavi's kind of slow at the mouth.
No, it's great. Believe me, I wish I had an hour to continue talking with you, but I'll have to plan it maybe another one of these, or maybe on my next trip up to Napa, since I'm pretty close in Los Angeles. So
that'll be a pleasure, and look forward to seeing you sooner rather than later.
Exactly. So for all those,
and any of the guests that are on this, please let us know when you're coming to Napa. We'd love to enjoy a glass or two of wine with you.
So thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you for your time today, Michael. It was really honestly a pleasure. So I want to thank Michael Mondavi Family Estates, also our partners at Folio, who do such a fantastic job of supporting us, and everyone involved. It's great. So before I sign off, I also want to give everyone a heads up that next Thursday we're doing another Touton Live, as we do every Thursday. But next Thursday is a unique one. So we're going live at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So we're doing it a bit earlier, 9:30 a.m., but we're going to Bordeaux. We're going to Chateau Angelus, and we're going to be going live with the owners, Stephanie and Hubert of Chateau Angelus, and they're going to show us the harvest live and in person. So that's going to be a really cool one. We've never done anything like that. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Okay, can I tune in on that one? That sounds terrific. That is really great.
Exactly. That's the first one I've ever seen. So it's going to be really cool. So it'll be early for us. So it'll be 6:30 a.m. So if we get up early, we could watch on the West Coast.
Wine is not just for breakfast anymore.
Exactly. So Michael, thank you again. And for now, we'll sign off from Napa Valley. But cheers to everybody who tuned in, and we'll see you next Thursday. Thank you again, Michael. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Stay well, everybody. God bless.
Cheers.